Men, do your neighbors know you are Catholic, or is your external faith segmented to a Sunday at Mass only existence? We are called to live our faith boldly beyond Sunday. Today, we are joined by two men that have focused a lot of their lives over the last few years to not only live, but also help men live their Catholic faith 24/7. Stay tuned.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Catholic Gentleman podcast. Today we are joined by two gentlemen that I know quite well, Adam Minihan and David Niles. To many of you, they need no introduction. They are the hosts of the Catholic Man Show podcast, but they are also co-founders of a Catholic radio station here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. They live right down the street from me, unfortunately for them. But no, it's they are good friends, and they're husbands and fathers who take their faith very seriously, and they have dedicated a lot of their lives to evangelizing, but also into developing cultures of faith at home. And so today we're going to talk about their new book focused on the domestic church and see what they can teach us about living your faith in your home and creating a Catholic culture in your home. So thank you so much for being with us, Adam and David.
Yeah, man, it's a blast. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
It's great to hang out with you outside of Friday mornings.
That's right. Yeah. We meet every week for breakfast on Friday, and it's always a highlight of my week. So
I just want to say everything I know about the domestic church I learned from Sam. So thanks for letting me come on your show, Sam.
I've taught you well, young Padawan.
It was really great we've never written a book. This is our first book. It was very hard. We're not pros like you are, Sam, but in fact, I have a deeper respect and appreciation for you.
In fact, we're so not pros. We actually had to have 4 authors to write one book.
That's true.
So
tell us about 4 authors. Tell us about those 4 authors. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I have multiple personalities. And so,
well, we thought, if we're going to write a book about the domestic church, it would be beneficial for everybody if we brought our wives into this experience as well. So my wife and I, and Dave and his wife, we all got together and started writing the book. We started with like Dave and I would write a chapter, and then our wives would write a chapter, and then me and my wife would write a chapter. His wife and him would write a chapter, and then we just kind of mixed it up so that way we get a very wholesome and very different perspectives of the domestic church, all in each chapter.
Yeah,
got it. Yeah. That sounds complicated, honestly, but I'm glad you pulled it off. This is a much needed book. I guess just to get started, what really sparked the desire to write a book on this topic? And maybe give us just your definition of what this whole idea of a domestic church is.
Yeah, it's a great question. So to me, the domestic church is simply the life of faith lived at home. Right. That the being Catholic, being Christian, following the life of Christ is not something that takes place, just when you go to church on Sunday. Even if you go to daily Mass, my faith shouldn't be just at Mass. All of my life is the thing that builds that desire and builds, that relationship that I find and strengthen when I go to Mass. But everything, being a Christian, it encompasses every moment of the day. There's nothing you can do to escape it if you're doing it the right way. And so obviously when we go home, that's where we spend most of our time. So we need to make sure to put an intentional effort into making those spaces, the activities that we do there, sanctifying them by having them participate in that Christian life as well, because otherwise you're essentially living 2 lives. So the domestic church is just how we live out the faith at home. That's what
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of got started doing this. Originally, we were writing some articles that on the domestic church. We were kind of doing a series for a local magazine, and we said, hey, you know, this is going really well. We should take this and expand on them and turn it into a book. And so that's what we did. So we can have kind of bring it to more people.
Yeah, excellent. And so, I mean, was there something in your own daily lives or something in your, I mean, I guess the question is, did you see a lot of men and families not living a domestic church or be on Sunday, as you guys aptly call in your title, that caused you to even write that series for the local paper?
Yeah. So I think that if you asked most men, you ask them, would you want to increase your prayer life? They'd say, yes, of course. And then the follow-up question would be, well, how are you going to increase your prayer life? And then there's like this blank stare, like deer in the headlights kind of look most of the time, where the idea is like, yes, of course I would like to. But then it's like, well, how do you practically do that? Well, I'm not really sure how to practically do that. And just because of, our ministry with the Catholic Man Show, and Dave and I grew up together. So our families grew up together. My parents and his parents are best friends. We went to the same parish together here in Broken Arrow. We grew up together in the same neighborhood. We went to the same high school. We lived together after college. We started the Catholic radio station together. And then now we live across the street from each other, and our kids are best friends. So like we have a lot of history together. And so we had a great foundation from our parents. Our parents were very active Catholics in the community. And so we have a very similar story. And so we had a lot to pull from our parents and from just our personal background of how to live out kind of the domestic church.
Yeah. And I'll just say, like, for me, doing the Catholic Man Show together has been such a blessing for me. I guarantee you, nobody else has got more out of that show than I have, just because it's made me, like at the end of the day, you have to come up with something to talk about every week, right? And so that means you end up doing all this research and investigating the faith in a very active way. And throughout that process, I've just grown so much in my faith. So in many ways, this book was written to myself 7 or 8 years ago. Mm-hmm. Because before we started the show, I was taking my faith seriously. I had a long way to go. I still have a long way to go in my faith, but I've just learned so much. And so we wrote this book to the people who say, hey, I want to be Catholic. I want to take my faith seriously. I want that. I recognize the good and the beauty. I see the beauty in that life. How do I do it? So we wanted to just say, hey, here's some things that we're doing well that have borne fruit in our families. And I think that they will work for you as well.
That's great.
Yeah, you mentioned 7 or 8 years ago. I'm interested in that because, like, I think for every Catholic dad that like takes their faith seriously, there comes a moment when you're holding that child in your arms, or like you wake up to the fact of the huge responsibility that you have as a father. Like, and even if you're not a person of faith, you still feel that responsibility. But if you take your faith seriously, you feel even more like, I long to pass that down to my children. Like, I long to hand on a heritage of faith to them. But you've mentioned like this deer in the headlights look that a lot of guys have when you ask them, okay, that's awesome, but how are you going to do that? And like, I have no idea. And like,
right.
When was that awakening for each of you? And how did you kind of go about piecing together what that might look like for your family? You mentioned the show and having to do research, but there's probably some other things you did too to kind of like get started with that. Were there any practices you like embraced, or like, so when was that moment for you? And then what did you do to kind of figure out what that was going to look like for your family?
Yeah, I mean, those are great questions. So I think the first thing that, like, 7 or 8 years ago, I mean, we're both dads of 5. This is awesome.
Yeah.
Haley is pregnant, and then Pamela is pregnant, about to give birth.
Yeah, she may have had the baby by the time this episode comes out.
Wow.
So, 7-8 years ago was when we first became dads. And, like you said, Sam, you're like looking at this baby. And somebody told me this right before we had our first baby, and it really stuck with me. He said, like, as soon as the baby is born, take a vivid memory of what you look like, what your wife looks like, what the room looks like, the feeling that you have when you hold the baby in your arms, what the baby looks like, just the smell of the baby. Encompass all of your senses that you can possibly activate, and remember that moment, because that moment is going to be filled with joy. It's going to be filled with a lot of different emotions, and you're going to need to recall that emotion, those memories, as you're continually building up the domestic church, because as you guys probably both know as well, it's not always full of joyful joyful emotions, right? And so that moment was a realization for me that at some point on my deathbed, the person who I have become will face the person that I could have become. And so I wanted to make sure as a father that I was a producer, that I was somebody who gave to my family and not a consumer. I didn't want to be on my deathbed being like, if I would have just become this, if I would have just given more time, if I would have just taken my faith more seriously. And so whoever gave me that advice, I wish I could remember who it was, but whoever it was, I owe a great debt of gratitude towards, because it was the moment that I realized I have to take this faith seriously, because the church teaches that we're the first preachers of our family, right? That the responsibility of father and mother to pass on the faith to their children is their responsibility first and foremost. And so if the church is telling us this is what you are born, this is what you are called to do, you better take it seriously. This is your vocation. So those were that first moment for me of realization.
Yeah. And just to add to that, I think Adam and I really have very similar stories. If you couldn't figure that out, we basically spent our lives together. But in college, I stopped practicing the faith. I didn't become anything else. Really, I just became apathetic. I kind of thought, religion, I'll get back to that someday. Praise God, I did, because that's not the case not the case for every soul who embraces the sleep of apathy. So after college, Adam and I were living together, and Catholic radio actually played a big role in my reawakening, if you want to call it that. Shows like Catholic Answers, Apologetics, really lit the fire back in me about, what? The Catholic faith is true, and you can prove it. Actually, it's not just like a big mystery that you have to take on, take it on faith, as they say. No, it's actually real. Jesus was a person. He came to earth. He saved us. And he started this church, and it's called the Catholic Church. You should be a part of it. So as I just took that personal journey back into the faith, then I got married, and all of a sudden, the responsibility that I had was a lot higher. Not even before we had kids, now I have a wife that I need to, help grow, and she's going to help me grow. And then for us, children came along very quickly. Our oldest was born 9 months and 1 day after our wedding. So awesome. Praise God for that. So anyway, there have been a lot of different things, kind of stages in my journey. Catholic Answers, I used to listen to every episode of Catholic Answers. Kind of joke that I studied at the seminary of Catholic Answers. I wasn't in seminary, but the school of Catholic Answers. Yeah. But it's been a journey, and it's, like I said, our fifth child is getting ready to be born. The journey is long from over. So you'll have to check back in about 10 years, and I'll give you another update.
Is that your fifth or combined fifth?
It's my fifth. Adam and I both have number 5 on the way.
Oh, praise God. Well, that's a fun.
Yeah.
So you're catching up to Sam and I, because we both have 5. So it's a good number. Awesome. Praise God. So honestly, it was not really what was in my head or outlined prior to this call here, but I was just reading Thomas Aquinas a few days ago where he talks about friendship, and the idea there's nothing more on this earth to be prized than true friendship because of the fact that it helps you grow in virtues. It helps you grow in holiness. Can you guys speak a little bit on that and how you guys have been able to help each other out? And then maybe speak to our listeners that don't have good Catholic friends to help them on this journey, and maybe some suggestions you guys would give them, because I'm admiring your friendship, and it just seems pertinent, for our roles as men and husbands and fathers trying to live as good sons of the church.
Yeah, I mean, I credit a lot of my reversion back into taking, like, I'm not Catholic, but I live Catholic. I am, like, Catholic is my identity, who I am. I'm a son of God. I take that very seriously, and I credit a lot of that to obviously my parents and grandmother who continually prayed profusely for me to come back to the faith. But then also David. I don't think that I would be where I am in my faith life today if it wasn't for him. If it wasn't for him pushing me, calling me out when I need to be calling out, encouraging me when I need to be encouraged. There was one time Dave and I were right after college. We were living together, and it was a Tuesday. And if you're not married and you're just hanging out, you can, after work, you can like go to the pub, or go hang out somewhere, and
you can do anything
you can do really anything you want.
It was
like,
incredible, Dom.
Yeah, it was a wild day. It was a wild time.
It's the best 20 minutes of my life.
So we were both like, we were kind of listening to Catholic radio again, and we were kind of like trying to figure out why are we not fulfilled? Why are we not doing, why there's something missing? And I think Dave walked in one evening, and he goes, "Hey, Adam, I have this crazy idea, but hear me out. Don't cut me off." I'm like, okay. I'm kind of like on the edge of my seat. I'm not really sure what he's going to say. And he goes, "What if this Sunday we go to mass?" And I was like, "Whoa. That's a crazy idea."
It's kind of a crazy idea.
And it's like, we were like really trying to, come back into our faith, and we just didn't, it was him taking on that spur of the moment of saying, maybe that Holy Spirit moment of encouraging me to go to Holy Mass again. And so that was kind of what snowballed our faith journey back into taking it seriously. And if it wasn't for that night, who knows if God willing, I would have come back anyway, but who knows? And that played out throughout, the next 10 years of our lives, where each one of us, at one point in time would push each other. Exodus 90, we both went on Exodus 90 together. That was a huge turning point in both of our prayer lives of, yes, of course we say in the rosary, we're doing Auxilium Christianorum, we're doing all these things, but are we truly having a true friendship with Christ? Do we have a relationship with Christ? Holy friendship in this life prepares us for the friendship that we will have with Christ in the next, right? This is like Christ has given us the gifts of the gifts of friendship to prepare us for friendship with him in eternity. And so I just can't credit Dave enough. I think next time, when we get on the other side of the veil, we'll actually see the benefit it is to have holy friends. The benefit this is why Sam, Dave, and I, and a couple other guys, we meet every week together. We meet every week, and a lot of times we don't have an agenda. We don't have things that we're actually going to go over, but it's more of like, hey, how are you doing? It's just how's your prayer life? How are you doing? How's, your work life? How's family? How's, just like, let's check in on each other. Let's help each other. Let's be there for one another. And so I can't credit Dave enough for that, but maybe you can.
Yeah. So the value of a friend, go back to any culture. Cultures that were leaving writings behind, some of them were writing about friendship, goes all the way back to Cicero. I imagine that's one of the universal things, is that people in every culture have glorified the benefit and beauty of a good friend. And you see, go back to, you mentioned Aquinas, go back to a different father of the church, Augustine. Obviously, in his confessions, he's writing about when he was a kid, he went and stole this fruit with his friends. He did that because the friends he was with were reinforcing him in that direction.
Yes.
Then, later on, he meets another friend who reinforces him back and, brings him back into Christ. And so the friends that you're with just have a way of reinforcing your decisions, good or bad, right? So that's why it's really important that we choose good, holy friends. Good, holy friendship is it's a foundational thing to have, especially when you look at things like your domestic church, right? Because the domestic church is not an island. When you look at what is the church, what is it for? It's exclusive, but it's also inclusive. Okay, so you set yourself apart. The domestic church is sacred. The family is sacred in as much as it's set apart. The word sacred means set apart. Okay, so my family is set apart from the rest of the world because if you want to be in my family, you have to be these people. Okay, it's a very exclusive group, but the purpose is not, to exclude the world for the sake of my family. The purpose is to build up my family for the sake of the world. Okay, so that the family and the domestic church, it's actually ordered outward, even though it seems like it's all about excluding things and this, small group of people doing the things that are only here in the home. You do those things with those people so that you can actually build up the church, which is this broader thing. One of the things we get to in the book is how the domestic church is ultimately ordered towards hospitality. And so I bring that up because friendship plays this foundational role in achieving these things. Okay, so it's hospitality that ends up building a community that turns isolated houses into a neighborhood where you actually build friendships, where evangelization can take place. Because chances are your neighbors aren't all Catholic, right? And praise God, you have someone very easy to witness to. You don't have to invite them over and be like, all right, before we have dinner, I'd like to invite you to join the church. Maybe you do that. I don't know. That's a pretty bold move, but just your witness. Hopefully, the beauty of your family life, the joy that you have because of that, and you should be joyful. Christ wants you to be joyful. So if you don't feel joyful, maybe go talk to somebody about that. Get a spiritual director. But friendship has a way of building up these virtues in us, and bad friendship has a way of destroying these virtues in us. So we have to really analyze the people we're spending our time with. Are they really good for us? Because if they're not going to help us get to heaven, then probably need some new friends.
Yeah, I heard someone say once, maybe it's overstating the case, I don't know, but you're the sum of the three closest people to you. And this idea that we're formed by those relationships that are close to us. And so just switching gears a little bit, just to get a little bit practical about how to get started. So a guy's listening to this and he's like, this is all awesome. I love all of this. I want to do this. I want to be that leader in my home. I want to start setting the tone that we take our faith seriously as a family. And I want to do that. But where do I begin? What do I do? What's the first thing I should do? Should I go start a home altar? Or should I just, start praying all the liturgy of the hours? Or how do I do this? And so I guess, what did you guys do to get started? What would you recommend people, what some of the advice you give in the book?
Yeah. So I think this is an easy answer. First thing you do is pray. So if you don't have a prayer life, no matter what you do, it will be fruitless. If you don't have that committed prayer life where you're actually building a relationship with Christ, Adam mentioned Exodus 90. Exodus 90 is what taught me to pray. Before I did it, I was spending a lot of time in prayer, saying prayers. I said this devotion in the morning. I said a rosary throughout the day. I said these prayers at night with my wife. But I realized I was saying a lot of prayers and I wasn't actually praying. I wasn't spending any time listening to Christ. And so I think that if you don't have a prayer life, and then you try to incorporate beautiful traditions in your family with beautiful religious traditions, that your kids, they will know dad isn't really serious about this. And it ends up becoming like an oppression on your family. Your kids don't view it as something that really it's real. It's like this thing that's being forced on them. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important that it needs to be something that you do because you're in love with Christ.
Yeah.
Right? I just want to start there.
Yeah. Because your prayer life will then set the tone or the pace for the rest of your day, right? So if you start off in the morning with prayer, then and you give time for the Lord to speak to you throughout the day, that will have penetrated what you've done throughout the day and like lead you to what He wants you to do, right? So again, let's go back to the example we said, like, do you want to pray more? Yes. Okay. How are you going to do it? So Dave said, like, first of all, you have to have your own prayer life. And then I highly recommend, have a separate time for you and your wife, right? Your individual prayer life. One of the best things that I did when I first became married to my wife was I built a pray-do. And I set that pray-do right at the foot of our bed. Now there's a lot of like
a kneeler, if you don't know what pray-do is.
Correct. Yeah. So it's a kneeler. And so there's a lot of theological significance of putting it at the foot of the bed. But the main, another main reason why we did it right there is because we can't go to bed until we bypass that kneeler, and so we can't go to bed until we pray together. Now, not everybody can do that, right? Not everybody can build a pray-do or kneeler, or they may not have the room or whatever, but you can set aside a sacred spot for you to pray. Now, what is that going to do? That's going to bleed into, if you have children, your prayer life is now going to bleed into, and they see you praying, right? The kids come down early in the morning. Maybe they see mom and dad praying that's the first thing they see, right? Elizabeth, the first thing she sees when she walks out, Elizabeth is Dave's daughter. First thing she sees when she walks out is dad kneeling at in prayer. This is a beautiful image, right? This is what John Paul II said was his cause to his vocation to the priesthood, was seeing his dad kneeling in prayer in the morning, right? So this is going to pay dividends throughout the course of your family life. But then also it's like, okay, now we have this prayer life. I have a prayer life. I have a prayer life with my wife. How do I bring that out to my family to where it's not this obnoxious? Anybody who has a lot of kids or young kids, the idea of, oh yeah, let's all go pray a family rosary. That all sounds wonderful, right? And it can be done, and it can be done well, but
until you start,
and then you're like,
you're like, how long until this is over?
Right.
It's also an occasion for sin.
Right. Yeah. You're like, you know what? Never mind. Everybody to bed. Go to brush your teeth. Go to bed.
Right.
Because it's like they're climbing on things. This is just not. It's really tough to do, right? It's not. I'm not discouraging it. I think that I think we should strive towards that. But
can't figure out why your one-year-old won't kneel and be still.
Right? Yes,
we're praying.
Yeah. Why is my 8-year-old not levitating yet? This is ridiculous. But so I like to try to incorporate family prayer in times that we're already spending time together. Right. So the family dinner table is a perfect time. Obviously, you pray before meals, but as we're eating, this is a moment of time that you have captured where they can't really go anywhere, right? And you have their attention because we're sitting at the dinner table together. So what I've done is I put up a whiteboard. And this is something, again, not everybody can probably do, but I put up a whiteboard literally right by my dinner table. Okay. And so I am able to teach my family a little bit as we're eating. Either, something from the catechism. The Baltimore Catechism is a beautiful place to start teaching your kids.
It's great for kids.
Yeah. And for you just to brush up. But it's a great reference point, right? So why did God make you? To know Him, to love Him, to serve Him in this life so that we have eternal life with Him forever in the next, right? So like there's all these things that you can teach them on the whiteboard where there's a visual learning thing. And then right at the end of dinner, let's conclude dinner together, right? Let's have a family dinner. And then let's conclude it together in prayer. So what we do is we write up on the board everybody's name. Then we have a column of prayer intentions and then a column of intercessory saints. So each person within the family writes what they would like to, or tells me what they would like to pray for through what saint. And we all go through. Okay, so dad would like to pray for his business meeting tomorrow through the intercession of St. Thomas Aquinas. Mom, for homeschooling tomorrow through the intercession of St. Maximilian Kolbe. We're
Luke
going,
obviously wants to pray for his godfather.
right. Yeah. Godfather normally makes it on there quite a bit. So we all go
He needs
through,
a lot of prayers.
He needs a lot of prayer.
Yeah,
This guy right here.
That is true.
But we all go through, there's a significance here, right? So we all go through and say, here's what we'd like to pray for. And here's the intercessory saint that we'd like to pray for. Now, what does this do? This gives us a reminder for the next 24 hours. Oh yeah, Luke is nervous about a school test that he has coming up. I should help pray for that. Oh yeah, dad has a business meeting that's coming up. Maybe at noon when they're together and dad's at work, they can pray for dad, knowing that he has a business meeting come up. So it teaches each other to pray. It teaches us to pray together as a family, but then it also teaches us to invoke saints into our prayer life, to teach us like, oh yeah, there is a patron saint of school. There is a patron saint of, basically every occupation that there is, so it gives us an opportunity to
10 of everything. I mean,
right. Yeah. So it gives us the opportunity to introduce the saints to our children and to get them practice the virtue of prayer, the habituation of calling upon the saints to pray for us and pray for our intentions throughout the day. So that's just like one, same you asked for, like, what's a real concrete, practical example of how to increase your prayer life. That's just one thing that we do that I found is very beneficial and efficacious for our family. And it's really paid dividends that I didn't realize we're going to be cashed in.
Basically, everything in the domestic church comes back to prayer. It's not about, let's kneel down and pray all the time, right? Sometimes it's about feasting and sometimes it's about fasting. People know that, obviously fasting is a form of prayer. So is feasting. Feasting is a prayerful activity, just like fasting is.
That's my favorite form of prayer.
Yeah, ontologically, it's higher. Ontologically, it's a higher form of prayer.
Right, because eschatological or heavenly realities supersede earthly or natural realities, and feasting is in fact that heavenly reality. It's the eternal feast of the Lamb. So, I agree, Sam. Chocolate cake is my favorite prayer. Praise God. And when you live a liturgical life, or liturgical living is kind of another hot button keyword term, whatever that is popular today, that goes along with the idea of the domestic church, that whatever the liturgy is of the day, that is going to inform and shape our home life. Okay. So if it's a Friday in Lent, we're not going to be having dessert. We're going to be obviously no meat. And it's a great practice if you can make every Friday throughout the year a meatless day. That's just I think it's a beautiful tradition, a constant reminder throughout the year that, hey, Fridays are different. Why are Fridays different? Well, because Jesus died on a Friday, right? The same reason Sundays are different, because Jesus rose from the dead, right? Sunday is the best day. And that's a phrase we say a lot in our house. Like, oh, can we do this? Yes, because it's Sunday. And Sunday is the best day. Can we have dessert? Of course we can have dessert. It's Sunday. Sunday's the best day, right? And so, like, a lot of times, this living liturgically, it ends at coming like, all right, this is another great day to have cake. Because it's like, maybe it's the Feast of Saint David, or Saint Adam, the original man. He's actually on the liturgical calendar as a saint. But it just is a constant reminder of that the things that we're doing are informed by the liturgy, and that means that our whole lives are this offering to God. Okay. Once again, that everything we do at home, whether it's dining, whether it's cleaning, whether it's playing, whether it's learning, they all should be done as this gift to God. And the domestic church is where it all takes place, in this liturgy, because the domestic church has its own liturgy. And that's what we're trying to teach to our kids. And it all comes back, just to kind of wrap up this long answer to your question, to your prayer life, that if your kids if they don't interpret dad like, oh, dad doesn't have a prayer life, then they're not going to have a prayer life. They don't want one either. But if they do see, and I hope that fathers out there can try to organize their day so that their kids see them praying. I think that's actually very, very important. You're not praying so that they'll see you, but you pray so that they will see you. That's not why you're doing it, but hopefully you can do it so that they will see you doing it, because that's such an important lesson. When they come out and see dad on his knees, that you cannot replace the lesson of that sight in the to a child. So by them seeing dad pray, knowing dad prays.
That's a man of prayer.
Okay. One thing I know about my dad prays. They're going to want to pray. And then that takes, once again, that prayer life takes so many different forms, and it's so beautiful in all the different ways that it comes up.
Yeah, that's excellent. No, I appreciate that very much. I want to ask any of our listeners, if you're watching us on YouTube, drop comments. Adam gave us a great idea of what he does during dinner and how he lives that out as the father and as the head of his family, and love to hear your thoughts. So I want to talk about relationship. We've been talking about prayer, and we've been talking about a little bit about relationship with wives and a little bit about relationship with our children. But I feel called that talking about the importance of your relationship with your wife, because I've heard it both, and more predominantly with the female or the wife trying to be the leader, the spiritual head, and the leader of the family in our modern day. But also with men who maybe are trying to pray the family rosary, but their wife's not fully on board, and their kids definitely aren't if your wife's not. And we've all experienced that. So I'd love for you guys to talk about kind of that relationship with your wife, the importance of it, and things to do on a regular basis, or to progressively grow in this domestic church or living beyond Sunday with your spouse.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, we had mentioned that, praying with your wife and having a habitual time of prayer together is really important. Also having, date your wife, take time to spend, like, what made you fall in love with your wife? Well, whatever that is that made you fall in love with your wife, you should take time to do such things on a monthly basis. Because if you're a man who is like, maybe you didn't take your faith life seriously, and maybe now all of a sudden you realize, nope, I'm the head of the house. The tone starts with me. That transition a lot of times doesn't work very well unless they know how much you care, right? They don't know. You can go through the motions. Oh, something's different about dad. He's trying to do this whole prayer ththing. But if you're not spending time with them, if you're not loving them, if you're not, nurturing and being with them, spending time, wasting time with them, as this is a very leisurely activity, then they may not take that seriously. And so you need to go back and be, what made you fall in love with your wife? Well, whatever those things are, set aside time throughout the month to go do that once, one time a month if you can. Maybe it's only one every 2 months, but spend quality time with your wife. Now, what that is going to do is create this relationship, this bond that you already have cultivated, and hopefully it's still, burning and everything is going well. But if it's not, this gives it an opportunity to go back to realize, like, no, I love you, and I love you for who you are, and I love you so much that I want to spend eternity with you in heaven. And God wants us to spend eternity together with Him in heaven. And so I want to lead us to do that all together because I love our family so much. So I think you got to make sure that you spend time, you set time aside to date your wife.
Yeah. I mean, if you're a husband, then your wife is your vocation, right? There's a temptation to get distracted by your children, thinking that, the kids come first. Actually, they don't. My father-in-law has a really great saying that, talking to his children about his wife, he said, "Look, I chose her. You guys just showed up later." Okay. And I just think that's hilarious. But the mother is the heart of the home, right? If the husband is the head of the home, then the mother is the heart of the home. It's your job as husband and father to provide a space where she can blossom. Okay. Because her children desperately need to know the love of a mother. They need to know the love of a father, but the way that they're going to grow up when they're seeking relationships of their own is, how did dad love mom? That's how they're going to say, either I need to love a woman the way dad loved mom, or if they're girls, they're going to say, I'm looking for someone the way, they're going to look for the love that they saw emulated in their father. So you need to make sure every day to have mom as a priority. Like in my house, if you want to incur the wrath of dad, then talk back to your mother in front of me.
Yeah.
Like that is the, like, your world will end if you do that, because nobody talks to my wife that way. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're one of my kids, right? Like, in fact, that kind of seems like it's worse if you're one of my kids, to talk to my wife that way, because she gave birth to you. All right. So you kind of owe her more than the neighbor kid. But I don't care who you are. Nobody speaks to my wife in a way that I don't like. And because she is my responsibility. So if I am not going to uphold her dignity, who is?
Yeah.
One,
you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And one of the little things that my father did really well, that's an easy thing to do. This is like a practical, very easy thing to do to start. My father, when he came home from work, the first thing he did before changing clothes, before saying hello to all the kids, he walked straight over to my mom and gave her a kiss. And so this is just a very small example of setting the tone for the family, of saying the first thing I do when I come home is love your mother. Now, from loving your mother flows into loving the children. It sets the tone of love within the home. So, I mean, that's something very, very simple that every man can do and probably should do, is go home from work and kiss your wife.
Yeah. I mean, it is kind of hard to, when you come in the door from work, and the floodgates open and the kids are like, "Daddy's home!" Oh my God! And they're like running, and it's such one of the best. Thing. It was like one of the most beautiful moments in life. But to like receive them and say, "Okay, before I say hello to you, where's your mom?" And like they will they'll learn very quickly that who the priority is in the home, and that it's mom. And you know what? That I think a lot of people who are kind of not used to this concept, sometimes they're a little scandalized or offended at this idea. Like, well, aren't your kids going to feel rejected by you? They won't. When you uphold the dignity and like when you uphold their mother in love this way, they in no way feel rejected. In fact, I think the children tend to feel validated in knowing there's such a security in knowing that dad loves mom. Okay. And the children need that security. It doesn't make them feel unloved, because you're not refusing love to them, right? You're just saying, your mother is my first priority. Where is she? And then welcome and then smother the kids with kisses, right? I mean, it's just great. It's the best moment of the day, coming home from work.
Well, and that's just it. If our kids aren't learning the pinnacle of love and, in this life between husband and wife, they're going to look to the world to teach them love and relationships. And that's the wrong place. So, I just love hearing that from you guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, that idea of security is so important. Like, there's nothing that's more anxiety producing to a kid than knowing that mom and dad don't like each other. And maybe they're arguing all the time, screaming at each other. Like, that is terrifying for a kid. But on the flip side of that, like knowing that mom and dad love each other a lot and they show affection to each other in front of us, like, oh my goodness, like kids just feel so safe and secure in an environment like that. Mm-hmm. There's one other thing I wanted to point out too, and that I think is so important with husbands and wives, is just using the bad things or the seemingly bad moments to grow as well. Like those moments of friction, those moments of tension. Like even if you're doing a lot of those things that you guys were talking about, like those moments can still pop up. But that doesn't mean that you have a bad marriage or like, we had an argument, so our marriage stinks, like, no, like you can use those to grow too. Because just like in your body, like where there's a pain, there's a hurt or something, like, that's where the healing needs to happen. Like that's where you need to give that extra attention. And sometimes frictions can come up in our marriages, but even those can be opportunities to grow stronger and really listen to each other and really understand each other. And say, how can I serve you better? And like, and so even those can be moments of growth, of both recognizing our own wounds or the wounds of our spouse, and then growing stronger together through kind of encountering that friction. So it can be those beautiful dates, but it could also be even an argument can be healthy and healing if you use it in the right way and accept it instead of as a learning opportunity instead of just a negative thing. So
Sam, let me just comment on that real quick, because you're so right. I mean, I think most people have probably noticed how terrible children are at apologizing, right? They go up and they're like, sorry. And, but that's because maybe, they need to have good examples of it. Obviously, nobody alive right now is perfect. I'm pretty sure. I mean, I'm willing to bet.
Yeah.
So, you're going to have mistakes. Your kids are going to make, it's great. Your kids are also going to make mistakes. And who do you think they learn from? How do they think they learn how to handle those mistakes? Well, by watching you handle yours, because you got them. And so when you need to apologize, don't make your apology a secret. Okay. If the mistake wasn't a secret, then the apology shouldn't be a secret. Whether you need to apologize to your wife or you need to apologize to your children, because
and this is
I've had plenty of those where it's like, hey, Elizabeth, I really overreacted earlier. I misunderstood, and I'm very sorry. I shouldn't have talked to you. I shouldn't have gotten so upset or whatever. They need to hear that, and that models for them, this is how you apologize to a person.
Right. And this is actually, we have a whole chapter in this in our book called The Language of the Domestic Church. Right. So like there's a language of the church, the church, whenever you're on Sunday in the liturgy, there's a language in the liturgy, but there's also a language in the home. Right. One thing as men, we have to stop doing is talking bad about our wives. Mm-hmm. Right. That, like, if you have a friend that is talking bad about his wife, even if he's saying like he's just trying to vent or something like that, you stop him right there, because you took a vow in front of God and the church to honor and to uphold her. And there's no honor being given by talking bad about your wife, mm-hmm. To others. So even if you do, like Sam was saying, like, of course there's going to be times of friction. Of course there's going to be times of frustration or a disagreement, but that doesn't mean you get to go and talk about that to your friends and vent and talk bad about your wife, because it is your duty as a husband to uphold her with honor and dignity.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so beautiful. And I love that idea of like modeling forgiveness. Like I've apologized to my kids when I've lost it, unfairly or whatever. But that idea of like modeling healthy relationships. Like I've heard people say, I never saw my dad argue with my mom. And while on the surface, that sounds like a really wonderful thing. At the same time, like, I think it's actually really good for kids to see parents maybe have a disagreement. I'm not saying argue in front of them on purpose, but if something comes up, like show them that there can be repair, there can be healing, there can be forgiveness, there can be restoration of that relationship. There's been times when, maybe I've gotten a little frustrated with my wife, or she's gotten frustrated with me, and we like say something tense to each other in front of the kids, but we make up, and then later that day, maybe we're hugging or holding hands or something. And like the kids see that like a healthy relationship can have tensions and disagreements and still recover and be healthy and good and loving, and that forgiveness is healing. And so I think that's such an important thing. And I'm so glad you have a chapter on that mm-hmm. in your book. I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's right, Sam. And just because you have a disagreement with your wife doesn't mean it has to be like this, argument, right? You're going to have disagreements, and learning to handle those well. I mean, that's great for your children to see, because that's like a really essential skill that children are learning, is conflict resolution. Because children have a lot of conflict, whether they're like hitting each other with stuff or fighting over who's got, the toy, like learning how to confront and deal with conflicts between your relationships in life is like one of the basic human elements. Like without that skill, you won't have any relationships. Okay. You will be spending a lot of time with your own Netflix subscription or something like instead of, at the bar with friends or, anything else with friends.
Yeah, absolutely. So for my last question, I just wanted to talk to you. You guys mentioned at the beginning, was it at the heart of the domestic church is hospitality? Is that what you said? or service?
Yeah, so the
or-
church is
maybe
it's
like-
ordered
like
towards
ordered,
hospitality.
the end goal is hospitality, right? Like, because we were supposed to go and evangelize all the nations. But again,
Yeah.
it goes back to like the prayer life. You can't give what you don't have. So you need to have it within the home in order to share it with everybody else. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. I want you guys to talk a little bit more about that. I know that in your book you talk about service, and then you talk about hospitality as that end goal. How does living the domestic church and these relationships, and obviously this prayer life, our relationship with Christ, really lean us towards that reality and ultimately a happy, more joy-filled, more loving experience in this world on this side of the veil?
Yeah. Do you want to talk about how you threw a block party? You want to do that?
Yeah, so Adam helped me throw a block party earlier this year, which I had never done before. And I'd always wanted to go to a block party. And I decided, well, I guess I'll have to throw one. It was actually not that hard. You like get a bounce house and you print off some invitations that says, hey, come to the block party. And we were able to get a guy in the neighborhood who has a business to sponsor a keg of beer. We had some hamburgers, boom, instant party.
Yeah.
But it was really, really great. You realize as your children start to grow that you actually have a vested interest in the domestic churches of the other people in the other domestic churches in your community. That you cannot actually isolate because at some point you realize I need a good young man who's to marry my daughter. If she's not called to the religious life. And I think in most cases, probably, our children will discern the vocation of marriage. So if there are not other good domestic churches in the community, well, that's going to be a problem for you. So you actually have this vested interest. I have a vested interest in the lives of Adam's children. Because I want his boys to grow up to be very eligible young men for the sake of my daughters. And I want my son to grow up to be an eligible young man for the sake of other people's daughters and vice versa. And so it's so important that we have a holy domestic church. Once again, the heart of the domestic church is the love between the husband and the wife, but it's that bears fruit in children. And all of this is ordered towards this idea of hospitality, that where there is love, love seeks to share itself. Okay. And hospitality says, I have something good. Let me share it with you. Come in and share with me the goods that I have. Please come in, join us. Right. And so, in hospitality, you become one of the family for that moment, for the evening. Everything that we have is at your disposal. And if it's not that, then it's not quite hospitality, right? It's not an authentic hospitality, because that's really what it is. It's this overflowing of love. It's a very Trinitarian in that way, that, in the Trinity is just this outpouring of love that is life-giving. And so that's why the domestic church is so important, because it is it's the bond of community that will essentially, that it's going to build up the church, right? This is going to, without it, evangelization is hard, almost impossible. It's a very natural evangelization when people come up to you and say, hey, you have such a beautiful family. And when they see the joy, when they come over to eat and like, wow, why are things different here in your house? What is it about it? Because the domestic church, when analyzed and done well, has a way of ordering our life. It orders relationships in the domestic church. Who is the father? Who is the mother? Who are the children? What are their roles? Because like Adam said, there's a liturgy. And that means, just like in the Mass, sometimes the priest says and does something. Sometimes the people say and do something. Okay. Think about just being at the table. There is a liturgy here. There's a right way to say things. When children and adults, this is when you speak, and when you speak, this is what you say. And these things are good, and they build love and beauty in the home. And so that's just one example of how it's ordered. And all of these things come together, and they play this massive, important role. Really, I think a good litmus test for the domestic church is the dinner table. That the way children and adults, the way a family conducts itself at the dinner table is a really good litmus test for how things are going everywhere else. Because you know, when you're playing, when you're doing all these things, that teaches you so many lessons that you get to practice at the table.
Yeah, and I guess, John, to bring it back, full circle about we started out with holy friendships, right? I mean, this is something that we first started out with. And when we were all young, right, John, when you and Sam, when we were all young, we went outside. I said when we were.
Right, we're not young anymore. Huh?
Right, no, we're not young anymore. You're right. When we walk out, when we were kids, and we were out there playing, like it's like you pointed and there's the Smith's house, that's the Johnson's house, this house over here. You knew all the neighbors. Right. Everybody, you knew that their last names, you knew who they were, you knew how many family or how many members were in their family. You knew all this stuff. Well, today's world, that's just not the case. Right. I walk outside and it's like, you know what? I don't know who those people are over there. So we need to be able.
Luckily, our wives usually do.
Yeah. Luckily, our wives are really good at this. But we need to provide this atmosphere to be able to learn and welcome people into our home and to be able to share our lives with one another. Because what Dave was saying, it's important one of the most important things as a father I have come to realize is being able to provide my children with good friends, right? Because of the relationship that I have with Dave and how I realized how much I've grown in my life because of my friendship with him. I want that for my children. And so if you let your kids go out and play and you don't know who they're actually playing with, you don't know who their family is, you don't know what what they believe, what they don't believe, you don't know who they are. It's hard to know whether or not they're actually cultivating good, holy friendships or not good, holy friendships. And so we need to be able to provide this atmosphere of hospitality to bring people in, to not only show them the love of Christ, but to also get to know them and get to know, what their beliefs are. So that way you can make good, sound, prudent judgments on who my children should be spending their time with and who they shouldn't be.
I love all that. And the last thing I was just going to say is I love this idea of like the dinner table being a great litmus test for like the liturgy of the home. And like, for us, like I just got this icon, one of my favorite holy icons for like the wall in our dining room of, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's Andrei Rublev's Trinity. It's an icon of the Holy Trinity, and they're all sitting. They kind of look like angels, but they're all sitting around a table. And there's like a cup in the center that they're all sharing, which is like signifying communion. But they're kind of forming this half circle. But the way the viewer is looking at the image, it's almost like you're sitting in the fourth place, like you're cool. Being welcomed into this table that they're sharing. And I think it's such a beautiful image. And I think too, it's like this idea of love radiating outward, of like love wanting to be shared, like you were saying. And like the communion that we have around our dinner table as families is so, like the communion we share at Mass doesn't really mean anything if you don't have that communion at home. And like that communion you have at home, though, brings a whole new significance to being welcomed into the family of God and being welcomed to that communion that we all share at Mass. And I think that's such a beautiful image for the relationship we have with each other, but also the relationship we have with God and with the Holy Trinity as a relationship, a community of love.
Yeah, Sam, I think you're right. And the table, I think part of the reason why the table is so important to me is because when I grew up, etiquette at the table was very important, right? You tend to have the way you were raised, you tend to think like that's the way it should be done, So, but I do see that the way you behave at table, I'm not 100% certain if it's the way you behave at the dinner table teaches you how to behave everywhere else, or is it the way you behave everywhere else teaches you how to behave at the dinner table? I think it might be both. But another interesting thing we do just on that note in the book is we talk about the different rooms in the house and what they're like, the purpose of them. For instance, like a dining room actually sanctifies this idea of dining, because what you're done is you're saying, you know what, dining is so important. We have a room that's all we do. That's it. All we do is dine. and maybe sometimes laundry in the dining room. So we go through the rooms and talk about how, okay, this room is ordered towards this. But at the end, you come to the living room, and the living room is the best room because it's the only room in the house ordered towards the person. So all of the other rooms in the house tend to be ordered towards a natural need within the family, whether it's eating, sleeping, other biological necessities. But the living room is a room that's as such that just the very being together is so important, that we have a room where that's all we do. We just are together, because the person, the other one, the other here is so important that I want a room just to be with you.
Well, wonderful. Well, as we're coming here to the end, we want to hear where we can find this book. We'll drop it in the show notes, but let us know. I know that there's pre-orders now. When is it hitting mailboxes?
We actually just right before this interview, Ascension Press called us and said they're now shipping. So there's no more pre-order. You order, you go to Ascension Press, and you'll be able to start ordering it today.
Awesome. That's exciting.
And Adam is one of the only authors I know of who actually designed the cover of his own book, and the publisher liked it enough that they used it, which is incredible.
It is.
It's really nice looking. So order it.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for writing this book and for joining us today on this episode. We're really grateful and blessed by your presence and by this this book that you wrote, and we hope all of our listeners grab a copy of it. So thank you.
Thank you guys for having us. It was a great time. I appreciate it very much.
Love your ministry. Love what you guys are doing, and always promote it on my end. So we're grateful for you guys.
Yeah, thank you. Well, as we like to end every episode,
be a man, be a saint.